So I am a young woman and a detransitioner from the Central Valley of California, and I primarily speak on behalf of my experiences as somebody who's gone through the process, medically and socially, through transitioning and back, and also have connected with many other detransitioners, and I advocate for the rights of children growing up with their bodies fully intact, and for parents and families to be able to raise their children as they see fit, to say no, and be fully informed to what these procedures will actually do to their children. And my mom and dad, they were not really sure how to respond to any of this, but they could see that I was struggling a bit psychiatrically and that I needed to have psychological help. So they referred me to a therapist, but what they didn't expect was that the therapist would not actually help me with these feelings. At 13 years old, when I wasn't even graduated from middle school yet, was when the medical process began for me. I was put on testosterone shortly after my first shot of the blockers. And for a few years, my body and face and voice all began to masculinize. And by the time that I was in my freshman year of high school, I already looked like and sounded like a young man. I ended up undergoing surgery when I was 15 years old. Before I even had my driver's license and could operate a vehicle, I had my breast permanently and surgically removed. But that proved to be the major turning point in my transition when I realized just how much damage was happening to my body and that parts of my adulthood were being ripped away from me, potentially forever. I didn't know whether I was going to be able to have children of my own naturally, and of course I would never be able to breastfeed my children. I never would have the sensation or form or function back in that area of my body. And having that realization, something so existential, so young, broke me for years. I didn't know what to do with myself, but I knew only that I couldn't go on. At 16 years old, less than a year after I had surgery, was when my transition ended. And with that came a lot of grief, a lot of social isolation and alienation from my peers at school, from the transgender community that once celebrated me for going through this process, and even from my own doctors who no longer wanted to help me. They just looked at me like I was a shameful mistake, and I didn't have any guidance really on how to go back. And I basically had to figure out during that first year of my detransition how to move forward with my life. I didn't even know whether I was going to have a happy adulthood or a life after the facts. There were times when I didn't think I was even going to make it past 18, and I thought about ending my life. There are also school staff and teachers that are going behind the backs of these children's parents, getting in between them, getting in between that relationship between them, and telling them the way that you were made in your mother's womb is wrong. I have recently gone into contact with a young woman who actually had a school counselor who would refer several girls in her class to an outside endocrinologist. This is completely wrong. These are people with no medical or psychiatric credentials. And even if they did, no adult has the right to lie to a child about who they are, to allow them to believe that they're ugly, that they have to change the things about themselves that they cannot. What they should be doing is informing their parents of what they're experiencing. They should be telling parents that their child is experiencing emotional issues. They are identifying as transgender, and they should be allowing the parent to deal with that rather than handling it themselves with no real understanding of who this child is, because nobody understands and loves and knows the child better than their own parents. And this is exactly why we need more organizations that are focusing on the schools and what the education system is doing in regards to the transgender issue and how they're going behind parents' backs. We need to fight back against these schools, against the school systems that are doing this to our kids, that are getting between children, getting between their students and their families. And that is why I feel like organizations like Parents' Rights in Education are so integral to this fight. Whether you're a school counselor, a teacher, a doctor, if you are an adult outside of the child's family, if you are not their parent, you have no right to get in between them. So stop messing with our kids. This ends here.